Us here on this Friday, and we are packed this weekend here when it comes to sports, but I couldn't think of anybody better to help us kind of break it down as we head into rivalry weekend in college football than the analytics master himself, Bill Connolly, SB Nation. He joins us via the Miami Acura hotline. And Bill, like, how does it work, man? Do you even get any sleep like during the week, or are you just number crunching the whole damn time?
Well, I mean, you know, you can survive on 6 hours. I will say that. I do a pretty good job on 6 hours. So as long as you get that, everything else is fine.
Yeah, some people count sheep. Bill Connolly, he counts numbers, man, as they're jumping over his bed is what's happening there. It's just unbelievable. Some of the best advanced football metrics around can be found at Bill's Twitter page, at SBN_Bill C. Make sure you guys check it out if you want to really, really dive in and try to understand what's happening in each of these games. Nobody does a better job than Bill. And I want to start first and foremost because I know I've been talking to a lot of folks, and I keep hearing the same thing, Bill, that Chip Kelly, stick a fork in him. He is done. He may not win a game this year, and that it's the whole Chip Kelly experiment is over. Are we being a little premature with sticking a fork in Chip Kelly?
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, but let's put it this way. If he is done, if he's toast, if he's got nothing left to offer college football or football in general, I guess, this is what it looks like, right? I mean, they bomb. He comes back next year. They still bomb, and he's done by the end of 2019. Of course, that is on the table, but this also does take the shape of a pretty clear, like, what I call a year zero situation where you are instituting a lot of changes into, the DNA of your program, both in terms of offensive philosophy, in terms of practice style, in terms of just sports science, all the things he's trying to change about UCLA football, and then you're fielding a true freshman quarterback, and you're fielding a whole ton of freshmen and sophomores on defense and in the skill corps and pretty much everywhere. There are almost no seniors who are actually doing anything for this UCLA football team. So it's not hard to see a kind of a year zero situation, too, where, you know, it takes a lot longer than maybe we anticipated to get the ducks in a row, so to speak. But then, yeah, once they're set up, he's fine.
Yeah, and let's not forget, his schedule this year has been brutal, has it not, Bill?
Yeah, no cupcakes whatsoever. I mean, we thought maybe Cincinnati qualified as a cupcake. Turns out Cincinnati's pretty good. Fresno State is, 2 years ago they would have killed Fresno State even with this team. Fresno State is now very good. So, they miss Oregon State in Pac-12 play. There are no easy outs on their schedule at all. And so as opposed to talking about some 4-8 kind of struggle, now we are looking at a situation where there is a non-zero chance they go 0-12.
Yeah, so people just got to chill out. Give Chip Kelly a couple of years to get his players in, his system there, and then we'll be able to judge whether or not Chip Kelly is over and done with. Bill Connolly joining us, SB Nation. Make sure you check him out, SBN_Bill C on Twitter. Some of the best analytics in all of football, both college and the NFL. And we've got a rivalry game here, actually the rivalry weekend, but certainly here in South Florida, Bill. We got the Miami Hurricanes at home. They haven't beat Florida State in this building in a long, long time, but Florida State is not necessarily what they have been in the past. What are the metrics, what are the numbers and analytics telling us about this game?
Well, I mean, it tells us, first of all, that Miami is very, very good at the things that Oklahoma State, where did that come from? That Florida State has been very bad at. And so that's probably a pretty good sign for the Hurricanes. They can disrupt. They can take advantage of the patchwork offensive line. They can force negative plays, get DeAndre Francois into obvious pass situations, and then tee off. So if that actually comes to pass, then maybe nothing else matters. Maybe Miami will just kind of accidentally score enough points to win the game. But, at the very least, Florida State has improved. They've gotten their act together at least a hair these last couple of weeks. Now, our good team doesn't almost lose to Louisville at this point, and they really tried hard to lose to Louisville, but they're at least sort of pointing on an upward trajectory, and maybe they can find some things that work. The offensive line isn't quite as much of a sieve as it was about 3 weeks ago. So, I mean, they're trending upward. It's just Miami's already up at this point, and you would assume that Florida State's not ready to play at that level just yet.
And do you think, I mean, Mark Richt, he's been around a long time. Does Mark Richt leave the senior, the upperclassman for a freshman if he's not 100% and the team is not 100% behind this kid?
Yeah, I mean, you would think so. You would think that, if he makes the changes that he made here, that, everybody's on board with it. And so far, I mean, the offense isn't amazing by any stretch, but they're at least, it feels like they're not blowing as many opportunities. They're taking advantage of the chances they get. Overall, no matter who the quarterback is, they're doing a really nice job in the red zone, which is a change from last year. And so when they create those opportunities, they're getting a full set of points from it. But it is, you do figure that he needed to see quite a bit from a freshman to put a freshman in the game or into the starting lineup, and so far Perry's given him that.
Yeah, he certainly has. Bill Connolly, SB Nation, joining us via the Miami Acura hotline. One of the other big games in Florida is, it don't get any bigger than this, SEC football, big boy football here. LSU traveling on the road to Florida. Florida is in a very unfamiliar situation, an underdog at home in this game, laying 2.5 points right now. And this is one of the biggest games, not only from a betting standpoint right now, but certainly it's going to shape what happens in the SEC. Is LSU a little bit overrated and maybe Florida a little undervalued here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a difference in, but if you look at LSU's resume and then they're just kind of baseline level of quality, there's definitely a difference right now. The resume looks great. They did, they hopped on Miami early. They only had about 4 good offensive plays in that game, but that was enough with the turnovers and all that. And they got pretty lucky to beat Auburn in terms of turnovers and just being dramatically inefficient with the football, but still managing to, basically make about 3 good offensive plays and win. They aren't top 5 caliber good yet, but it doesn't matter. There are no takebacks when it comes to the wins themselves. So they're in a very good position right now. Florida probably needs a little bit of a breakthrough moment here. But, I mean, on paper, Florida might, if they're not the better team, they're really, really close to it. They've got a good defense. They should be able to render LSU's inefficient offense very inefficient. And as long as it's probably going to be one of those games that comes down to, who makes 2 or 3 big plays, who wins the turnover battle, all those those littler things is probably what's going to determine this.
And their only loss, Florida, to Kentucky, is looking less and less like a fluke.
Yeah.
Kentucky is actually a real team and a real program right now. So I don't think you can look at that loss and go, and that's pretty bad.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, using my S&P Plus ranking, Kentucky is 15th right now. Losing, you had a chance on the final drive to beat a top 15 team at home. Basically, that's how it played out. That's one way to set the narrative for that Florida game. There's no shame in that whatsoever. That was probably, if not a sign of growth, at least not a setback. Even though we know that Florida isn't really used to losing to Kentucky all that often.
Yeah, no, certainly not. But Kentucky is a real team, so this should be a fun game. Also in the SEC. Auburn and Mississippi State. Boy, oh boy, this is going to be. Could we get another? 3-2 game, 6-5? What the hell was that, Bill? What do you see in this game?
Yeah, it was 3-2, and I had a post up this morning at SB Nation kind of joking about that, just basically saying, Auburn and Mississippi State, they're not actually struggling on offense right now. They're just observing their history. This is the 10-year anniversary of the 3-2 game, and they seem to be unwittingly reverting to that form of late. It really is. Mississippi State's been a really interesting team this year in that, they play really good defense. They can run the ball really well. And it was just a question of, it was kind of a race against time. Could Joe Moorhead figure some things out in the passing game with Nick Fitzgerald, who isn't a great passer? Could they start to figure things out before defenses just loaded up against the run and shut everything down? And they lost that race against time, apparently, because the last 2 teams have loaded up against the run, shut that down, and Fitzgerald hasn't been able to pass them out of any holes. So it really is. Auburn's offensive line is going to get blown up by Mississippi State's defensive line. Auburn's going to force Mississippi State to pass, and they probably won't be able to. And so you do figure, if not 3-2, it would be kind of a surprise if either team topped about 21 or so.
The under might be looking very well here, but it's interesting because it's another home dog. Both Florida and Mississippi State will be home dogs this weekend, which is a lot of people are looking at that going, boy, this could provide some value and some opportunity. But there is one game tonight, Bill Connolly joining us, SB Nation, that I want to throw it out there because I love this. This is kind of one of my locks tonight. I love Utah State getting 2.5 points over BYU. I think Utah State is a very undervalued team. I think people are way overvaluing how good BYU is. Am I crazy along this thought line here?
Well, my numbers love Utah State. It kind of makes me nervous because, I mean, they thought that Utah State would kill Air Force last week, and they only won by 10 or so. But, yeah, I mean, on paper, BYU has been trending down since the Wisconsin win. That was a great win, but it was a situational win. You know, they just made timely plays and you know, got a missed field goal at the end and all that stuff. It was a great win, but it wasn't a sign of, hey, this is a top 20 team now. And Utah State, meanwhile, yeah, they almost outplayed Michigan State. Probably were unlucky to not win that game, and they've utterly destroyed some bad teams since then. And you know, Air Force aside, I guess. But no, I mean, they're on paper they're a very, very good team, and this is a game they should go to Provo and they should win this game. But we'll see. BYU obviously can play that kind of LSU style game management, make the right plays at the right time kind of stuff, and Utah State's going to have to cope with that. Utah State loses close games, like 5 close games a year, so this would be right up their alley to lose this game like 27-24.
Analytics be damned, especially Bill Connolly's SB Nation joining us here. All right, let's transition into the NFL, and I want to ask you certainly for the folks here in South Florida. You grew up a Dolphin fan. You grew up following them. I know that. And it was looking really good. You know, 3-1, it was looking really good the first 3 games, and then last week happened, and now Dolphin fans are ready to look for high bridges and start jumping here. What do the analytics say about the Miami Dolphins right now? Are they pretenders? Are they contenders? What are they?
Well, I think basically on paper they played like a 2-2 team, not necessarily 3-1, but you know, good enough to go to at least split 4 games. I think is basically what my analytics say anyway. They've been a little lucky on the turnover side. They are not dramatically efficient, but they're really good at creating big plays, which is a tricky thing because it's great to have. It's also hard to rely on. You never really know when those big plays are going to come. But they are very explosive. They're rendering their opponents less explosive. They win the field position battle. They do a lot of the little things pretty well. The big thing, the efficiency thing, they're not all that great at. So you do figure this is more like a 500 team on paper than 3-1.
And one of the teams, the very first team that they beat in a 19-day affair that they had to play in the weather here in South Florida was Tennessee. And I know you have written on SB Nation, the analytics aren't necessarily great for Tennessee. Are you buying Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans right now?
Well, I mean, they've shown a lot of the quote-unquote game management is apparently the phrase of the day. But, I mean, they do, you know, they limit big plays. They play well in the red zone. They do a lot of those types of little things. They're also dramatically less efficient than their opponent. And over time, that tends to catch up to you. So, yeah, on paper, they have been by far the worst of the 3-1 teams. And, you know, they played 4 close games. Now, the thing they've got going for them, of course, is that Mariota has been hurt for half of that spell. And, you know, he was out there throwing passes without really being able to feel his fingers a couple of games ago. So if he's able to get healthy and the offense improves as he gets more and more up to form and whatnot, then they can play better offense, and with a good defense, maybe that's enough. Like, you don't have to. There are no takebacks with the wins. They already have 3. So if they go 6-6 the rest of the way, they're in the wild card hunt. And you know, so I don't want to call them outright frauds or anything because their offense should improve, but they are very, very lucky to be 3-1. I can say that.
And let me ask you, because I've asked a few people this now, and I keep getting different answers. But when you look at the Jets situation and what's going on, and you look what happened with the Rams in this NFL, can you win with a defensive-minded head coach and a young quarterback? Is that even possible anymore?
I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but it does seem like a pretty weird combination. There are definitely the stretch between good offenses and bad offenses in the NFL right now is much, much, much bigger than between like the best and worst defenses. So if you can find, it does seem like there's a lot of opportunity if you can find a really good offensive-minded head coach who clicks well with a young quarterback. You can, create some sort of benefits from that, and I mean, anything's possible, but yeah, it does seem like that's kind of at this exact moment in time, at least, the right recipe.
What's the biggest surprise thus far for you, Bill, looking at the NFL? Is Kansas City and what they've been able to do, is that one of the biggest surprises for you? What have you looked at and go, well, I didn't see that coming?
Well, yeah, I mean, even everybody who was high on Patrick Mahomes heading into the year, I don't think they were this high. So anytime a first-time starter can do this and even against the Broncos the other day, where he struggled in a lot of ways. The young quarterbacks will struggle on the road against a pretty, a feisty home crowd and a good pass rush and all that. He still settles himself and goes out and makes every play in the fourth quarter and wins the game. I thought, that was probably his least impressive game from a stat standpoint, but maybe his most impressive game from just a mental standpoint. So that was really encouraging to see. I think the biggest surprise to me has just been the number of good offenses, plain and simple, because it doesn't seem necessarily like a fluke right now. The offenses are finally, the closed-mindedness of a lot of the play calling in the NFL seems to be kind of dissipating a little bit, and teams are basically saying, well, we can get free yards doing these things, throwing short to guys at the line of scrimmage and doing all this. Why aren't we doing more of that? And a lot of teams are doing more of that, and surprise, surprise, it's working pretty well. But obviously now, roughing the passer, that hasn't hurt offenses by any means. The illegal contact penalties have helped. So there is that aspect too, but a lot of this is just play calling.
And have you, Bill, you being an analytics guy, and Bill Connolly, SB Nation, Bill, I'm telling you, analytics has taken over baseball. We know that. And to a certain degree, even in the NBA, but do you see the analytics machine eventually taking over the NFL? Can it take over the NFL like it has these other leagues?
Well, I think the shift towards more passing, that's something that analytics folks have been saying for a while, that it just doesn't make sense to run the ball as much as you run it when passing is more efficient. And then, so I think we're starting to maybe start to see the beginnings of, this optimal, what we would call a statistically optimal style of play, like with baseball with the 3 true outcomes and the home runs and the strikeouts and all that. There are not many stolen bases in the NBA, of course, or in basketball in general. You got a lot more 3-point attempts. Long twos are bad and all that. We kind of come up with a statistically optimal style, and I think we're starting to see that in football as well, with the short passing game, with teams running less than ever. Now, that said, there's always a way to zig when everybody else is zagging. The Royals basically loaded up on speed and winning the World Series a couple of years ago. So my initial thought is, I don't want the sport to be boring. I don't want everybody to be doing the same thing because the analytics say so, because basketball's gotten kind of boring at times. But there's always a way to basically load up on the inefficiencies that a new system, so to speak, creates. And I think you're going to see some teams doing some interesting things in that regard, too.
Yeah, it's coming, that's for sure. All right, Bill Connolly, SB Nation. Make sure you follow him. Nobody does analytics better than he does. College football, NFL, at SBN_Bill C. Make sure you follow him. It's a great follow. And, Bill, thanks for taking a few minutes out, hanging out with us, my friend. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.